The great crystal chamber had stood for 12,000 years. It floated at the center of the galaxy, built by species so old that their names had become legend. Today, 17 elder races filled its seats. They were beings of light and shadow, of metal and thought, of forms that no human eye could fully understand. They had ruled the stars since before Earth had cooled from fire. They called themselves the Galactic Concord, and they believed they knew everything worth knowing. They were wrong, Queen. Cythera of the Velanthi hegemony sat upon the highest throne. Her body was made of living crystal, and light moved through her like blood through veins. She was 9,000 years old. She had watched empires rise and fall. She had seen species born and go extinct. Nothing surprised her anymore until the humans came, 100 years ago. Humanity had discovered faster than light travel. This was nothing special. Many species reached the stars eventually. The Council had noted their arrival, studied their biology, and dismissed them. Humans were small. They lived short lives. They were emotional and irrational. Their bodies broke easily. Their planet was a chaotic mess of weather and disasters. They would either destroy themselves or remain a minor species forever. The Council was very confident in this assessment. 8 months ago, the Virkar Dominion had invaded human space. The Virkari were warriors. They had conquered 43 star systems. Their fleet was massive. Their soldiers were bred for battle over thousands of generations. They expected the humans to surrender within weeks. The Virkari lost 3/4 of their entire fleet. They sued for peace. They gave up territory. They paid tribute. An empire that had never known defeat was broken by a species that had only been in space for a century. This was why Queen Cythera had called this emergency session. This was why representatives from every elder species now sat in the crystal chamber, their forms flickering with worry. And this was why she had done something unprecedented. She had invited a human to speak ambassador. Laius Vance walked into the chamber alone. He was 53 years old, which meant he had perhaps 30 years left to live. By Velanthi standards, he was barely a child. He had gray hair at his temples and lines around his eyes. He wore a simple black suit. He carried no weapons. He looked very small standing in the center of that ancient chamber, surrounded by beings who could end his species with a single vote, but he did not look afraid. The representatives studied him with various senses. The Mindweavers tried to read his thoughts and found only chaos. The Virkari survivors in attendance stared at him with something that might have been hatred or might have been respect. The Silthan traders calculated his value and found their equations returning errors. Queen. Cythera raised one crystalline hand, and the chamber fell silent. Ambassador Vance, she said. Her voice was like wind through glass. You stand before the Galactic Concord. We have ruled these stars for longer than your species has existed. We have cataloged every sentient race. We understand the mathematics of war, the physics of conquest, the biology of survival. We understand everything. She paused. We do not understand you. Laius Vance inclined his head politely. I'm honored to be here, Your Majesty. I'll answer what I can. You will answer everything, the Queen said. It was not a request. 8 months ago, the Virkari Dominion attacked your colonies. They sent 12,000 warships. They had weapons that could crack planets. They had soldiers who feel no pain and no fear. They had tactical programs that have predicted the outcome of every battle for 6,000 years. She leaned forward on her throne. Your species had 300 ships. Your soldiers were untested. Your tactics were unknown. By every calculation, by every model, by every law of probability. You should have been destroyed in the first engagement. That's what the Virkari thought too, Elias said. A ripple went through the chamber. The Virkari admiral present made a sound that might have been a growl. Instead, Queen Cythera continued. You broke their fleet. You drove them from your space. You forced an empire to its knees. And we do not understand how. She stood from her throne, and her light filled the chamber. We have studied your biology. You are fragile. You require constant maintenance. You cannot survive in vacuum, in extreme heat, in extreme cold, without elaborate protection. Your bones break. Your skin tears. You age and decay with disturbing speed. Elias nodded. All true. We have studied your technology. It is crude. Your weapons are derivatives of our own designs from 3,000 years ago. Your ships are inefficient. Your computing power is laughable. Also true, Elias agreed. We have studied your tactics. They follow no recognizable pattern. Your commanders make decisions that appear random. Your soldiers take actions that serve no logical purpose. Your entire military doctrine seems designed by someone who does not understand military doctrine. It's a matter of perspective, Elias said. Queen Sithra's light flickered with frustration. She was not used to being unable to understand something. None of it explains the impossible, she said. None of it explains how you won. None of it explains why my advisors, beings who have counseled empires for millennia, are afraid of a species that has been among the stars for barely a heartbeat. She descended from her throne and approached the human. She towered over him by 3 meters. Her light cast strange shadows across his face. So I ask you plainly, Ambassador. I ask you the question that has brought every elder species to this chamber. I ask you the question that will determine your people's future among the stars. The chamber was absolutely silent. Every being present focused on the small human standing alone in the center of the room, Queen. Sithra's voice dropped to almost a whisper. What makes humans so dangerous? Elias Vance looked up at her. His eyes were calm. His heartbeat was steady. The Mind Weavers could detect no fear in him, which frightened them more than anything else. That's a complicated question, Your Majesty, he said. The answer might take some time. We have time, the Queen said. We have all the time in the universe. And you will tell us everything. She returned to her throne and gestured to the chamber. But first, let us hear from those who have encountered your kind. Let us hear their testimonies. And then, Ambassador, you will explain what they experienced. Elias nodded and stepped back. He clasped his hands behind his back and waited. He knew what was coming. He knew the testimonies would be disturbing. He knew the council would grow more afraid with each one, and he knew that when they finally demanded answers, he would have to give them a truth that would change everything. He just hoped they were ready to hear it. The first witness stepped forward from the shadows of the great chamber. He was Vrekarai, 7 feet tall, covered in armored scales that had been bred for war over 10,000 generations. His name was Admiral Karath. 6 months ago, he had commanded the largest invasion fleet in Vrekarai history. Now, he walked with a limp. His scales were cracked in places that would never heal, and his eyes held something that no Vrekarai had shown in 6,000 years. Fear. Tell us what happened, Queen Cythera commanded. Admiral Korath stood in the center of the chamber. He did not look at the human ambassador. He could not bring himself to... We arrived at their colony world with 12,000 ships, he began. His voice was rough, like stones grinding together. The humans had 300. Our tactical programs calculated complete victory within 6 hours. We had done this 43 times before. We knew how war worked. He paused. We were wrong. The chamber waited in silence. In the first engagement, we destroyed 50 of their ships. They destroyed 3 of ours. The mathematics favored us completely. We pressed the attack, and then everything changed. His clawed hands trembled slightly. They stopped following the rules. They turned cargo ships into weapons. They rammed our vessels with transports full of explosives. Their pilots flew into formations that should have been impossible. They took damage that should have disabled them and kept fighting. They made decisions in seconds that our tactical programs needed minutes to calculate. He finally looked at Ambassador Vance. One of their pilots, a young female, her ship was destroyed. She was floating in space in nothing but a pressure suit. She should have surrendered. Any rational being would have surrendered. His voice dropped. She grabbed onto the hull of one of our fighters as it passed. She cut through the metal with a plasma torch. She killed the pilot with her hands. She flew his ship into our command vessel's engine core. She was singing the entire time, broadcasting music over open channels while she died. The chamber was silent. That was when we knew, Admiral Koreth said. That was when we understood that we were not fighting a normal enemy. We were fighting something that did not think the way we thought. Something that did not value what we valued. Something that would not stop, no matter the cost. He stepped back. We lost 9,000 ships. 9,000. To a species that had been in space for barely 100 years? And when we finally requested peace, they accepted. They did not demand our destruction. They did not conquer our worlds. They simply wanted us to leave them alone. He looked at the assembled council. That mercy frightened me more than the war. Queen Cythera nodded slowly. Thank you, Admiral. You may step back. The second witness came forward. She was Silthine, a being of living crystal similar to the Valanthi, but smaller and more delicate. Her form refracted light into rainbows as she moved. Her name was Merchant Prism, and she had spent 40 years trading across the galaxy. 3 years ago, she began, my ship's drive failed near an uncharted moon. We crashed. The damage was severe. There were 12 of us on board, 3 Silthine and 9 humans from a trading company we had partnered with. She paused to collect herself. The moon had no atmosphere. Our emergency supplies would last 18 days. Rescue was 22 days away. I calculated our survival probability at 0%. I prepared myself for death. The other Silthine did the same. We had accepted the mathematics. Her crystal form flickered. The humans refused to accept it. She made a sound that might have been a laugh. Your captain. A woman named Sarah Chen looked at my calculations and said, numbers are just suggestions. I did not understand what she meant. Numbers are not suggestions. Numbers are facts. But she would not listen. What did she do? Queen Cythera asked. She told her crew to strip the ship. Everything that was not essential to survival was taken apart. Engine components, hull plating, food containers, navigation equipment. She told them they were going to build an atmosphere processor from nothing. Merchant Prism's light dimmed with the memory. I told her it was impossible. The parts were not compatible. The engineering was beyond our capabilities. We did not have the right tools. The mathematics simply did not work. She looked at Ambassador Vance. She built it anyway. It took 19 days. 3 of her crew died in the process. The device should not have functioned. It violated at least 4 principles of engineering that I understood, but it worked. It produced enough oxygen for us to survive until rescue arrived. The chamber murmured with disbelief. When I asked Captain Chen how she had done it, how she had built something impossible, she said something I will never forget. She said we didn't know it was impossible, so we didn't know to stop trying. The third witness floated forward. It was a mind weaver, a being of pure thought that existed as a pattern of energy rather than matter. The mind weavers were telepaths. They had predicted the rise and fall of empires. They knew the thoughts of every species in the galaxy. Every species except one. We cannot read humans, the mind weaver admitted. Its voice echoed directly in the minds of everyone present. We have tried for decades. We have studied thousands of human minds, and we cannot understand what we find. Explain, Queen Cythera commanded. Every species we have encountered thinks in patterns. The Varakar think in straight lines. Attack, defend, conquer, rest. The Silthine think in spirals. Calculate, trade, profit, calculate again. The Valanthi think in crystals. Grow, preserve, endure, grow again. Every mind has a shape. Every species has a logic. The mind weaver's form flickered with something like distress. Human minds have no shape. They are chaos. They hold contradictions without breaking. A single human can contain love and hatred for the same person at the same moment. They can believe something is impossible while working to achieve it. They can know they are going to die and refuse to accept it. It turned toward Ambassador Vance, who tried to predict human behavior during the HFY War. We failed completely. We could not determine if humans would fight or flee, surrender or die, show mercy or show none. Every prediction was wrong because humans do not follow their own patterns. They choose differently each time, based on factors we cannot identify. The Mindweaver's voice grew quieter. Do you understand what this means? We have predicted the actions of every species for 8,000 years. We have never been wrong. With humans, we are never right. They are not just unpredictable. They are unknowable. The three witnesses stepped back into the shadows. Queen Cythera sat on her throne, her crystal form dark with thought. The testimonies had disturbed her more than she wanted to admit. She had expected to find a weakness, a pattern, something she could understand, and therefore control. Instead, she had found chaos. She turned to Ambassador Vance. "You have heard what you appear to be," she said. "Impossible warriors who do not follow rules. Impossible survivors who do not accept mathematics. Impossible minds that cannot be predicted." She leaned forward. "Tell us what you are. Tell us how a species so fragile, so short-lived, so apparently irrational has become something that makes ancient empires afraid." Elias Vance stepped forward. The light of 17 elder species fell upon him. He looked very small. He looked very calm. "To answer that, Your Majesty," he said, "I need to tell you about Earth, about where we come from, about what made us this way." He clasped his hands behind his back. "I need to give you a history lesson." Ambassador Elias Vance looked around the great crystal chamber. 17 elder species watched him with senses he could barely comprehend. They expected answers. They expected explanations. They expected him to reveal some secret weapon or hidden technology that had allowed humanity to defeat the Varekari. He was going to give them something much more disturbing. "Before I explain what humans are," he said, "I need to ask you something about yourselves. I need to understand where you come from." Queen Cythera's light flickered with impatience. "We are not here to discuss ourselves, Ambassador. With respect, Your Majesty, you are. Because the answer to your question starts with understanding how different we are. Not in what we can do, but in what made us." He gestured toward the Valenthi Queen. "Your species evolved on a world called Valenthos Prime. I've studied the records. Your planet has had a stable climate for 40 million years. No ice ages. No mass extinctions. No catastrophic meteor impacts. Your world is a garden, carefully balanced, perfectly suited for life." The Queen said nothing. Elias turned to the Varekari Admiral. "Your species was engineered over 10,000 generations. Every aspect of your biology was selected for strength, for endurance, for combat. Your evolution was guided and controlled. There were no surprises, no random disasters, no chaos." Admiral Korith's scales shifted uncomfortably. Silthanelius continued, gesturing toward Merchant Prism, evolved in crystalline caves where the temperature never varied more than 2 degrees. The Mindweavers emerged from a gas giant's upper atmosphere where storms follow mathematical patterns. Every elder species in this chamber came from a world that was, by cosmic standards, stable, predictable, safe. He paused. "Earth is not like your worlds." He raised his hand, and a holographic display appeared. It showed a small blue planet, swirling with white clouds. "This is our home. Let me tell you what it's like." The display zoomed in, showing the planet's surface shifting over millions of years. "Our climate changes constantly. We have ice ages where frozen sheets cover half the planet, followed by periods of extreme heat. These cycles are not predictable. They do not follow patterns. They simply happen, and whatever is alive must adapt or die." The display showed massive volcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts, shifting continents. "Our planet is geologically active. The ground itself moves. Continents drift. Mountains rise and fall. Earthquakes destroy cities without warning. Volcanoes erupt and darken the sky for years. We call these events natural disasters, but they are simply Earth being Earth." The display showed various predators: wolves, lions, sharks, snakes. Our world is filled with predators. Every ecosystem has things that want to kill and eat other things. Our ancestors were not at the top of the food chain. They were in the middle. They had to compete with creatures faster than them, stronger than them, deadlier than them. and they had to do it without claws or fangs or armor. He let the display fade. Do you understand what I'm telling you? Every species in this chamber evolved to fit their environment. Your worlds shaped you into optimal forms for optimal conditions. When your environments were stable, you became stable. When your worlds were orderly, you became orderly. His voice grew quieter. Humans evolved to survive chaos. The chamber was silent. We don't have a single optimal form because there was never a single optimal condition. We had to be strong enough to fight predators and clever enough to avoid them. We had to survive heat and cold, drought and flood, famine and plague. We had to adapt to everything because everything was trying to kill us. Queen Sithra's form flickered. You speak of environmental challenges. Many species have overcome such obstacles. You're right, Elias said. But you overcame them by finding solutions and preserving them. When the Volanthi faced a challenge, you solved it and then maintained that solution for millions of years. Your society, your technology, your way of thinking became stable because stability was possible. He shook his head. For humans, stability was never possible. The solution that worked yesterday failed tomorrow. The adaptation that saved one generation killed the next. We could never stop changing because our world never stopped changing. He began to pace slowly. Do you know what happens to a species that lives like that for 200,000 years? Do you know what it does to the mind, to the culture, to the very way of thinking? He stopped and faced the council. It teaches us to never accept that any situation is permanent. It teaches us to never trust that any solution is final. It teaches us to never believe that any problem is unsolvable. He pointed toward the Vrekari Admiral. Your tacticians calculated that we would break after losing 50 ships. Their calculations were based on how Vrekari would respond, how Silthine would respond, how any rational species would respond. But humans don't calculate breaking points the same way. We don't see a battle going badly and think, this cannot be won. We think, this cannot be won yet. He pointed toward Merchant Prism. Your engineers said the atmospheric processor was impossible. The mathematics didn't work. The physics didn't allow it. But humans have been doing impossible things for our entire existence. We built fires when we were supposed to freeze. We crossed oceans when we were supposed to drown. We went to our moon when we were supposed to stay on the ground. Impossible is just a word we use for things we haven't done yet. He pointed toward the Mind Weaver. You cannot read our minds because our minds were built for chaos. We hold contradictions because contradictions kept us alive. The human who could love and hate at the same time could form alliances with enemies against greater threats. The human who could believe something was impossible while working to achieve it could attempt things that rational minds would never try. Our chaos is not a flaw. It is our greatest adaptation. Queen Cythera rose from her throne. Her light was troubled. You describe resilience, she said. You describe adaptability. These are valuable traits. They explain how you survived. They even explain how you fought. But they do not explain why my advisors are afraid. She descended toward him, her crystal form towering over him. Resilience is not dangerous. Adaptability is not threatening. A species that survives is merely a species that exists. You have told me what makes humans survivors. Her light focused on him like a searchlight. Tell me what makes humans dangerous. Elias Vance looked up at her. He had known this moment would come. He had prepared for it his entire journey here. But knowing something and facing it were different things. He thought about Earth, about his home, about his daughter who was waiting for him to return, about all the humans across all the colonies who would live or die based on what he said next. You want to know what makes us dangerous? He said slowly. You want to understand the thing that your advisors cannot explain. The thing that makes ancient empires nervous about a species that has been in space for barely a century. He took a deep breath. Then I need to tell you about something that humans have that no other species seems to share. Something that we developed in those 200,000 years of chaos. Something that makes us very different from every rational being in this chamber. Queen Cythera waited. I need to tell you, Elias said. About irrational commitment. The words hung in the air like smoke. Irrational commitment. The elder species exchanged glances through various means. Light flickered between the Valanthia. The Mindweavers shared confused thoughts. Even the stoic Vrekerai shifted in their seats. "Explain," Queen Cythera commanded. Her voice was sharp. Elias Vance nodded. He had their attention now. He had to make them understand something that no elder species had ever truly grasped. "Every intelligent species in the galaxy makes decisions based on calculation," he began. "You weigh costs against benefits. You measure risk against reward. When the mathematics of a situation become unfavorable, you change your approach. You retreat. You surrender. You negotiate. This is rational. This is logical. This is how intelligent beings survive." He paused. "Humans can do this too. Most of the time, we are as rational as any species. We calculate. We measure. We make sensible decisions based on evidence." His voice dropped slightly. "But we have another capability. A capability that seems to be unique to our species, or at least far more developed in us than in anyone else. We have the ability to look at the mathematics, understand them completely, and then choose to ignore them." The chamber rustled with confusion. "I do not understand," Queen Cythera said. "Ignoring mathematics does not change mathematics. If a battle cannot be won, refusing to accept this does not make it winnable." "You're right," Elias said. "In theory, but here's the thing about humans. When we commit to something, truly commit, something changes in us. We stop calculating whether we can succeed. We start calculating how to succeed. The question changes from, can this be done, to how will this be done? And that change, that shift in thinking, makes us do things that rational minds cannot predict." He turned to the Vreker Admiral. "Admiral Koroth, you said your tactical programs calculated human breaking points. At what point did you expect us to surrender?" The Admiral's scales shifted. "After losing 30% of your fleet, that is the standard threshold. Every species reaches a point where continued fighting becomes statistically futile. At 30% losses, the mathematics favor surrender. And how much did we lose before we stopped fighting?" The Admiral was silent for a moment. "You did not stop. You lost over 70%. You kept fighting. Your final ships were held together with emergency repairs and determination. And you kept fighting, because we had committed," Elias said. "We had decided that losing was not acceptable. Not because we didn't understand the odds. Not because we were stupid or ignorant. We understood exactly how unlikely victory was. We simply refused to let that stop us." Turned to address the entire council. "Let me give you another example. In our history, there was a city called Stalingrad. Two great armies fought for control of it. One army was winning. They had more soldiers, more weapons, more supplies. By every calculation, the defenders should have surrendered." He let the silence stretch. Instead, the defenders fought for every building, every street, every room. They fought when they ran out of ammunition. They fought when they ran out of food. They fought when they ran out of medicine. The battle lasted 5 months. Millions died. And in the end, the defenders won. "How?" Merchant Prism asked. "If the mathematics favored the attackers, how did the defenders prevail?" "Because the attackers were fighting a battle," Elias said. "The defenders were fighting for their home. The attackers had a threshold, a point where the cost became too high, where victory was no longer worth the price. The defenders had no threshold. They had decided that their home would not fall, and no amount of death would change that decision." The Mindweaver floated forward. "This is what we cannot read in your minds. This ability to hold a decision even when logic demands it be abandoned. But I still do not understand how this makes you dangerous. Stubbornness is not a weapon. By itself, no." Elias agreed. "But combined with everything else I've told you, it becomes something terrifying. Because here is the truth about humans." He stepped into the center of the chamber. "We are not stronger than you. We are not smarter than you. We are not more advanced than you. In almost every measurable way, humanity is inferior to every elder species in this room. Your bodies are more durable. Your minds are faster. Your technology is centuries ahead of ours. If we fought you on equal terms, we would lose." His voice hardened. "But we would never fight you on equal terms. Because the moment a human commits to a fight, we stop following the rules. We improvise. We adapt. We sacrifice. We do things that tactical programs cannot predict, because tactical programs are built on rational assumptions, and we are capable of being irrational." He looked at Queen Cythera. "Your Majesty, you asked why your advisors are afraid? Here is the answer. Every species in this chamber has a threshold, a point where logic demands retreat, a point where survival instinct overrides commitment, a point where a rational being says this is not worth dying for." He spread his hands. "Humans have that threshold too. We are not suicidal. We do not seek death. Most of the time, we are as sensible as anyone. But we are capable of ignoring that threshold. We are capable of looking at certain death and saying, 'I don't care. This matters more than my life.' What matters more than life?" Queen Cythera asked. And there it was. The question he had been waiting for. "Many things," Elias said. "Our homes, our families, our beliefs, our pride, our sense of justice, the future we want for our children. When a human fights for survival, we are dangerous. When a human fights for something we believe in, something we love, something we have decided matters more than our own existence." He met the Queen's ancient eyes. "Then we become something else entirely. Then we become the species that looks at impossible odds and says, 'I will find a way.' The species that fights until the last breath and then finds a way to keep fighting. The species that does not surrender because surrender is not an option we are willing to consider." The chamber was absolutely silent. "This is what your advisors fear," Elias said. "Not our ships. Not our weapons. Not our tactics. They fear that they cannot predict us. They fear that every model, every calculation, every assumption about how we will behave might be wrong. They fear that if they push us too far, we will commit to their destruction, and then nothing will stop us." Queen Cythera's crystal form had grown very still. "You describe a species that cannot be reasoned with," she said slowly. "A species that cannot be predicted. A species that might decide for reasons no one can fathom, to destroy everything rather than accept defeat." She stepped closer to him. "So I ask you plainly, Ambassador Vance. I ask you the question that every being in this chamber wants answered." Her light fell upon him like judgment. "Should we fear you?" The question echoed in the crystalline chamber. Every elder species waited for the answer. The fate of humanity hung on the words. Of one man standing alone among giants, Elias. Vance took a deep breath. He knew that his next words would determine. Everything the silence in the crystal chamber was complete. Every being present had stopped moving, stopped thinking about anything except the small human standing before the queen of the Valanthi hegemony. The fate of an entire species rested on his answer. Elias Vance looked up at Queen Cythera. She was 9,000 years old. She had watched civilizations rise and fall. She had made decisions that affected billions of lives. And right now, she was waiting for him to tell her whether humanity was a threat that needed to be destroyed. He could show weakness. He could tell them that humans were peaceful, that they only wanted to coexist, that they would never threaten the elder species. But he had seen the fear in their eyes. They would not believe weakness. They would see it as an opportunity. He could show strength. He could threaten them, tell them that humanity would burn the galaxy before accepting defeat. But that would unite them against Earth. They would strike first to eliminate the threat. He had to find another way. "No," he said finally. "You should not fear us." A ripple of surprise went through the chamber. "You should fear what we become when someone threatens what we love." Queen Cythera's light flickered. She had not expected that answer. Elias continued, his voice calm and steady. "You've seen what humans do when we are invaded. When we are pushed into corners, when we are told that we cannot survive. The testimonies you heard today showed you humans fighting for our lives. Humans refusing to accept defeat. Humans doing impossible things to protect ourselves. He paused. But you've only seen us defending. You've never seen what happens when humanity unites behind a single cause. Not fighting for survival, but fighting for something we believe in. He began to walk slowly among the assembled representatives. The Varakari attacked our colonies. They killed our people. They threatened our existence. And yes, we fought back. We broke their fleet. We drove them from our space. We made them pay for every human life they took, stopped, and turned back to face the Queen. But then we let them surrender. We let them keep their homeworld. We offered them peace. We did not pursue them. We did not seek revenge. We did not demand their destruction. We let those words hang in the air. Do you know why? The chamber waited, because we weren't protecting ourselves. We were protecting our people, our families, our homes. The moment the threat ended, the moment our loved ones were safe, we stopped fighting. The war was over because the reason for war was over. He looked around at the ancient beings surrounding him. It is your safety. That is your assurance. Humanity has no interest in conquering the galaxy. We do not want your worlds or your resources or your technology. We do not dream of ruling the stars. We just want to live. We want to explore. We want to build futures for our children. His voice grew quieter. We are not your enemies. We have never been your enemies. The Varakari attacked us, and we defended ourselves. If they had left us alone, we would have been content to trade, to learn, to grow alongside the rest of the galaxy.
Ow.
Queen Sithra's form shifted. You paint a picture of a peaceful species. But you have also told us that humans are capable of irrational commitment, that we cannot predict when you will decide to ignore the mathematics of a situation. How can we trust that humanity will remain peaceful? Elias nodded. He had been waiting for this question. "You can't," he said simply. "Not entirely. No one can predict the future with certainty, not even the mind weavers. I cannot promise that humanity will never become a threat to anyone. I cannot promise that we will always choose peace." He stepped closer to the throne. "But I can tell you this. Humans do not commit irrationally to destruction. We commit irrationally to protection. The pilot who crashed her ship into your vessel, Admiral Korath, she was not seeking death. She was protecting her crewmates who were escaping in a shuttle behind her. The defenders of Stalingrad were not fighting because they loved war. They were fighting because their families were in that city." His voice grew firm. "When humanity commits, truly commits, it is almost always because we are protecting something we love. Our children, our homes, our way of life, our future. Threaten those things, and you will see the kind of humans that make empires fall." He looked directly at Queen Sithera. "But if any species in this chamber ever threatens human children, human homes, human futures, not our territory, not our resources, but the things we love, you will discover something terrible." The chamber held its breath. "You will discover that there is no calculation we will not ignore, no cost we will not pay, and no line we will not cross. And we will not stop until the threat no longer exists, even if we have to tear the galaxy apart to ensure it." The words fell like stones into still water. Ripples of shock spread through the assembled species. The Varakari admiral made a sound that might have been agreement or might have been horror. The mind weavers pulled away, their energy forms flickering with distress. Even the ancient Volanthi advisors seemed to shrink back. Queen Sithera stood absolutely still. Her crystal form had gone dark, all light withdrawn into her core. She was thinking, processing, weighing the words of this small human against everything she knew about the universe. The silence stretched for a long moment. Finally, she spoke. "You offer us a bargain, Ambassador? You tell us that humanity will be peaceful as long as we do not threaten what you love. You tell us that if we leave your homes and families alone, you will leave ours alone." "Yes," Elias said. "And you tell us that if we break this bargain, if we threaten the things that humans love, we will face destruction." "Not destruction," Elias corrected quietly. "Commitment. Total, absolute, unwavering commitment to removing the threat, whatever it takes, however long it takes, regardless of the cost. Is there a difference?" Elias met her eyes. "Ask the Varakari." Admiral Korath said nothing. His silence was answer enough. Queen Sithara was quiet for a long moment. Then, slowly, her light began to return. She ascended back to her throne and settled into it. "The council will deliberate," she said. "Ambassador Vance, you will wait outside." Elias bowed his head and turned to leave. But before he reached the door, the Queen spoke again. "Ambassador," he stopped. "You've given us much to consider, but I have one more question." He turned back. "If we had decided to destroy humanity today, what would you have done?" Elias looked at her, at the ancient queen, at the assembled power of the galaxy, at beings who could crush Earth with a fraction of their strength. "I would have sent a message home," he said. "And then I would have waited to see what happened next. You believe humanity would have fought us? All of us? The entire galactic concord?" Elias smiled slightly. It was not a happy smile. "I believe humanity would have made you understand very clearly why you should never have tried." He walked out of the chamber. The council deliberated for 6 hours. In the end, the vote was unanimous. Humanity was recognized as a sovereign power. No restrictions were placed on their expansion. No conditions were attached to their membership in the galactic community. When Queen Sithra's advisor asked her why, she gave a simple answer. "Because I believe him," she said, "and I never want to give him the opportunity to prove it." 3 weeks later, Ambassador Elias Vance returned to Earth. He walked into his small apartment, poured himself a glass of whiskey, and sat by the window looking at the stars. His daughter came in and sat beside him. "Did we win?" she asked. Elias thought about the question. He thought about the fear in the eyes of beings who had ruled the galaxy for 12,000 years. He thought about the warning he had given them and the promise it contained. "We survived," he said, "which means we won." She looked at the stars with him. "Do you think they'll ever test us? See if you were bluffing?" Elias took a sip of his whiskey. "I wasn't bluffing," he said quietly. And somewhere in that crystal chamber, they knew it. Every species in the galaxy has a limit, a point where they stop, a line they won't cross. He put his arm around his daughter. Humans have that line too. But when someone threatens what we love, we have the ability to erase it. And that, more than anything else, is what makes us dangerous. They sat together in silence, watching the stars. Somewhere out in the galaxy, the elder species were watching those same stars. They were updating their files on humanity. They were revising their threat assessments. They were making very sure that they never gave humans a reason to commit, because they had learned something important that day. Humanity was fragile. Humanity was short-lived. Humanity was irrational and chaotic and unpredictable, and that made them the most dangerous species in the galaxy.